Rock and roll lifestyles are legendarily unusual, so it only makes sense that rock and roll death styles can get pretty bizarre too.
Marvin Gaye was one of the most gifted performers ever to grace the music scene. In fact, his career was so illustrious that he could be considered an icon of the 60s, 70s, and the 80s. Gaye made his top 40 debut in 1962 and brought Motown its best-selling single of the decade only 6 years later.
Because in this life, I love music, and music is my love, it's all I know.
By the 1970s, he had broken the Motown mold and became a political firebrand. But the decade eventually left him cold. Gaye mounted a successful comeback in the 1980s, but things suddenly turned tragic when he lost his life in a domestic dispute with his father. On April 1, 1984, Marvin Gaye Sr. shot and killed Gaye in their Los Angeles home after a disagreement became physical. The relationship between father and son had frequently led to conflicts, some of which escalated to the point of violence. Strangely enough, Gaye's brother claimed that, as the singer was dying, he said he was content with his own demise and even suggested that the fight had been rooted in his desire to take his own life. Marvin Gaye Sr. would later be convicted of involuntary manslaughter, for which he received a 6-year suspended sentence and 5 years probation. Kirsty MacColl exploded onto the scene with her 1979 debut single, They Don't Know, before delivering multiple massive hits in the 80s. Most remember MacColl for her singing part in the classic Pogue song, Fairy Tale of New York, but she also worked with legends like the Smiths and Simple Minds. MacColl remained a popular touring artist into the 90s, but the new millennium spelled tragedy for this legendary singer-songwriter. In December 2000, MacColl took her 2 sons diving off the coast of Mexico. There they encountered a 31-foot motorboat piloted by wealthy supermarket chain owner Guillermo Gonzalez Nova. The boat, which was operating in a restricted area for vessels of that kind, rocketed towards one of MacColl's boys and forced her to push him out of the way. MacColl was struck by the vessel. She saved her son, but suffered fatal injuries to her head and chest. Nova claimed an employee of his had been piloting the boat at the time of the incident, and Mexican authorities eventually found that employee guilty of culpable homicide. Eyewitnesses later claimed that Nova had been piloting the boat after all, however, and it has since been alleged that the employee was paid to take the fall for MacColl's death. For a while, Kirsty's mother ran the Justice for Kirsty campaign in the hopes of bringing some resolution to the whole affair.
It was a lovely place, babe. You didn't have to die. It's so needless.
And while it did make some progress, the campaign shut down in 2009 after Nova died of natural causes. Pop culture runs in cycles, so it should come as no surprise to learn that blues music made a big comeback in the 1980s. And Stevie Ray Vaughan was one of the guitarists who helped along the genre's gradual fusion with the world of rock and roll. Vaughan was an exceptionally varied performer, perhaps best known for playing the iconic guitar riff from David Bowie's Let's Dance. As a solo act, he released several successful albums and toured heavily throughout the 80s, weathering several setbacks and remaining a legend in the field. Unfortunately, he died at 35 in a tragic accident. Leaving a concert in Wisconsin, Vaughan boarded a small helicopter piloted by a somewhat inexperienced professional. The pilot lacked the training to fly the aircraft using only the information on his instruments, leading him to lose control after being briefly blinded by the lights in a nearby parking lot. The helicopter crashed into a ski hill shortly after takeoff, killing Vaughan, the pilot, and 3 other passengers. While many blamed the pilot for the incident, it was later found that the helicopter company had others available who were far better suited to the conditions. In the end, the company paid out a settlement of $300,000 to Vaughan's family. Cliff Burton began his music career in high school and soon made a name for himself as a thrash metal bassist. In 1982, he met James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich, who convinced him to join their own up-and-coming act, Metallica. Burton lent his talents to the legendary album Master of Puppets, writing his name into the history of rock and roll, but his time with Metallica would soon be cut short. On September 27, 1986, Burton died in a bus crash in Sweden as Metallica traveled between shows. The driver claimed to have hit black ice on the road, leading the bus to skid off the road and flip.
And the whole bus just started flipping over. Wow. Everybody else walked out, and it's just like, where's Cliff?
Burton's bandmates were stunned by the loss. While Hetfield alleged wrongdoing by the bus driver, a later investigation cleared him of responsibility, marking Burton's death as a tragic accident. Toto are best known for their 1982 classic Africa, a truly iconic song that accounts for over 1 billion streams on Spotify. Toto were much more than their biggest hit, however, and they earned a devoted fan following for their eclectic range of songs and musical styles. Much of their success came down to the band's founder and drummer Jeff Porcaro, who was with them through the late 70s, 80s, and early 90s. Then, in August 1993, Porcaro died under mysterious circumstances. He told his wife he was feeling ill, went to a hospital, and died of an apparent heart attack. Officials decided Porcaro died from an acute allergic reaction to a pesticide he'd been using on his lawn, but a later medical examination claimed he had actually died of atherosclerosis. Media reports later suggested there had been some scandal to the musician's demise too, claiming his arteries had been hardened by decades of cocaine use. Porcaro's bandmates railed against these reports, however, strongly maintaining that drugs had nothing to do with the drummer's death. Teena Marie's career marked a unique moment in the history of rhythm and blues. Raised around black families in Venice, California, Marie quickly developed an appreciation and understanding for African American culture. She had become a professional singer by age 8, signing with Motown Records and eventually studying under Rick James. Nicknamed Lady T, Marie became one of the most successful white R&B performers of the 1980s.
When I'm on stage, I'm not shy at all.
Sadly, in 2004, she suffered a life-changing injury, one that may have eventually claimed her life. Marie sustained a severe head injury when a large picture frame fell onto her as she slept in a hotel room. This led to a pattern of seizures that followed her for the next 6 years, including at least one grand mal seizure a month before her death. In 2010, Marie's daughter found her unresponsive in her home. Paramedics pronounced her dead on the scene. Some sources claimed that Marie had been killed by a prescription drug addiction, but an autopsy revealed no obvious cause of death. In the end, the coroner chalked it up as natural causes. Loverboy formed in a warehouse in Calgary in 1978. Bassist Scott Smith wasn't a founding member of the group, but he joined them after their first gig and became as important to the group's sound as anyone. Smith also contributed to Loverboy's most iconic song, the massively popular rock staple Working for the Weekend. The group was no one-hit wonder either, with other classics like Turn Me Loose and Lovin' Every Minute of It under their belt. On November 30th, 2000, Smith was swept away by an ocean wave while piloting his sailboat off the coast of San Francisco. He was considered lost at sea and is obviously presumed dead, but his official designation remains missing. The band briefly went on hiatus after Smith's disappearance, but that pause proved short-lived. Even today, most of the original members still tour as Loverboy, with the notable exception of their most famous bassist. Loalwa Braz was mostly known for providing vocals on the 1989 Kaoma hit Lambada. The track was a powerful cross-cultural success. Kaoma were a French band covering a Bolivian folk song with an Afro-Brazilian beat and Portuguese lyrics. And while Lambada was certainly a success in its own right, the song lived on in the countless other pop hits it inspired. Decades after the song hit the charts, artists like Jennifer Lopez have cited Lambada as a guiding light for their own work. Tragically, on January 19, 2017, Braz's body was found in a burnt-out car near her home in Brazil. Authorities labeled the killing the result of a robbery gone wrong and eventually detained 3 suspects, one of whom was the manager of an inn Braz had owned. The manager later confessed to the crime. Braz was 63 years old and still relatively famous when she passed, leading to an outpouring of grief among fans. Stiv Bators brought an unhinged, chaotic energy to his music, which made him one of the early icons of Cleveland's punk rock scene.
I come from a Catholic background, and it's made me a pervert.
He lent his vocal talents to multiple groups throughout the 1960s and 70s, and in the 80s became a member of the punk supergroup Lords of the New Church. Bators was nothing if not a spectacle, even breaking up Lords of the New Church live on stage in 1989, but the world never got to see what he'd do next. In June 1990, Bators was hit by a road vehicle while sitting on his motorcycle. He fell to the ground and suffered a head wound, but Bators had received far worse hits in his life, prompting him to underestimate the severity of the injury. He returned to his home, blissfully unaware of the blood clot in his brain. It killed him as he slept that night. Bators was only 40 when he died, but his life and music continue to influence the punk rock genre to this day. Tenor Saw was a prodigy of the dancehall and reggae scene, attaining immense fame and success in his short life. Born Clive Bright in West Kingston, Jamaica, Saw grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, where he honed his skill as a singer. In 1988, Saw signed a contract with RAS Records, which likely would have elevated his career to new heights. But then in August 1988, Saw's unconscious body was found on the side of the road in Houston, Texas. He later died of his injuries in the hospital. Investigators struggled to get in touch with Saw's family, and no inquiries were made to U.S. law enforcement concerning his well-being, and so he was given a county burial in Texas. Perhaps Perhaps unsurprisingly, rumors soon began to swirl concerning Saw's death. Even today, many claimed that he was murdered, either by a deliberate hit-and-run, a savage beating, or some other means. And while there's been no hard evidence to suggest that the attack on Saw had been intentional, the strange nature of his death means those rumors may never go away.
Jeff Buckley is one of those once-in-a-generation musicians who left us way too soon. After making a name for himself in the Big Apple's club and cafe scenes in the early 90s, Buckley released his first and only album, Grace, in 1994. The record features several gems, including his hauntingly gorgeous and intimate rendition of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, a song that Rolling Stone included on its 2004 list of the greatest songs of all time. Grace proved that Buckley was on his way to becoming a music staple of the decade and beyond. But then, on May 29, 1997, Buckley took an impromptu dip in the Mississippi River while waiting for his band to land in Memphis. He was swept up and drowned in the wake of a passing boat. His body was found 6 days later in the water near Beale Street. The singer's death was ruled a tragic accident, leaving countless generations of music fans wondering what might have been.
I don't really need to be remembered. I hope the music's remembered.
The 90s were the golden age of R&B, and at the time, one girl group ruled them all. TLC combined R&B, hip-hop, soul, and pop to achieve massive crossover success with their game-changing albums Crazy Sexy Cool and Fan Mail. The group was made up of Tian T-Boz Watkins, Rosanda Chili Thomas, and Lisa Left Eye Lopes. Lopes is primarily known for rapping on TLC's music, such as the iconic verse at the end of their smash hit Waterfalls. The trio went through a lot during their time as a group, and tensions soon began to grow among them. In 2002, Lopes embarked on a spiritual retreat to Honduras. She was also filming a documentary about the country at the time.
You get to see it from my point of view.
On April 25th that year, Lopes was driving when she lost control of the vehicle and crashed. All of the passengers survived, but Lopes died from her injuries. She was just 30 years old. One particularly noteworthy aspect of her death is the fact that the moments leading up to it were all caught on camera, as the producer for the documentary was riding in the car with the cameras rolling. Some of that footage was used at the end of the 2007 documentary Last Days of Left Eye. Aaliyah was the it girl of the 90s R&B and hip-hop scenes. She scored a record deal at the tender age of 12, and at 15 released the game-changing 1994 album Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. She scored hit after hit in the mid to late 90s, including the Grammy-nominated song Are You That Somebody? And the crossover hit One in a Million. Ever the talented artist, she also made her way to the silver screen, playing Trish O'Day in the action-packed movie Romeo Must Die opposite Jet Li, as well as the unforgiving Queen of the Undead in the sultry vampire fantasy horror flick Queen of the Damned. By August 2001, Aaliyah had cemented herself as a staple in both the R&B world and Hollywood. That month, she headed to the Bahamas to film the music video for Rock the Boat, boarding a plane to return home on August 25th. In a bizarre and devastating turn of events, the overloaded plane crashed shortly after takeoff, killing Aaliyah and 8 other people.
She's a beautiful person inside and out, and we're gonna all miss her deeply.
Aaliyah was only 22 at the time of her death. Commonly known as Selena, Selena Quintanilla Pérez was a Mexican-American singer who rose to fame in the 90s, having fronted her family's band since childhood. Dubbed the Queen of Tejano, Selena was a Latin music powerhouse who blended its traditional sound with modern pop to create a sound all her own. Charismatic, talented, and passionate about her craft, she helped bring Tejano music into the mainstream, and she was truly adored by her fans. By March 1995, Selena was in the prime of her career. She earned a slew of Billboard Latin Music Awards, snagged a Grammy for Best Mexican-American Album for a 1993 album Live, and released her smash hit fourth studio album Amor Prohibido in 1994. Her red-hot career was destined to become hotter, until she was bizarrely gunned down by someone she had once trusted. Yolanda Saldivar was the president of Selena's fan club and eventually managed one of the singer's boutiques in San Antonio. Things went sour when Selena and her family accused Saldivar of embezzling money from both the store and the fan club. Selena agreed to meet Saldivar at a Days Inn in Corpus Christi, Texas on March 31, 1995 to retrieve financial documents that Saldivar still had in her possession. During their confrontation, Saldivar shot Selena in the back of the shoulder, damaging an artery. Selena ran to the lobby for help and identified Saldivar as the shooter before falling to the ground. She later died from her injuries.
She made it clear to us that was her best friend. That was her eyes. That was her ears. When she couldn't be there, we were to contact Yolanda.
Saldivar was convicted of Selena's murder and sentenced to life in prison. She will be eligible for parole in March 2025. Buckle up, kids. This is one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in the world of classic rock. Richey Edwards was the lyricist and rhythm guitarist of the Manic Street Preachers, a raw and rebellious post-rock band from Wales. Edwards was brilliant and deeply complicated, often struggling with his mental health, alcohol abuse, and self-harm. On February 1, 1995, Edwards left his hotel in London and vanished off the face of the planet. His family declared him legally dead in 2008, and the truth behind his disappearance remains a mystery to this day. That said, a few theories have emerged in the nearly 30 years since his disappearance. Some people think he died by suicide, given the status of his mental health and the fact that his abandoned car was found near a bridge where people had previously taken their lives. Others believe he disappeared of his own accord, with people reportedly spotting him in different locations well after 1995. Edward's sister Rachel told GQ in 2020 that she's still looking for answers in her brother's disappearance. Megadeth was one of the core thrash metal bands of the 80s and 90s. Founded by ex-Metallica guitarist Dave Mustaine, the group combined their aggressive yet melodic sound with pointed social and political lyrics to create some head-turning and head-banging music. Nick Menza laid down the incredible drumming on some of Megadeth's biggest albums, including 1990's Rust in Peace and 1992's Countdown to Extinction. Menza's dynamic, precise, and groovy style set him apart in the 90s metal scene, and he continued to rock with Megadeth until 1998 when he left the band to have knee surgery. Ever the dedicated musician, Menza continued to play music until he literally dropped dead on stage.
I'm not gonna lie about Nick Menza today. Hearing the news, it's pretty rough.
On May 21, 2016, Menza died while performing in Los Angeles with Ohm, his band with former Megadeth guitarist Chris Poland. He was 51 years old. Heavy metal was all the rage in the early to mid-90s, but by the end of the decade, nu metal was sweeping the globe. One of the core bands of that era was Deftones, a nu metal alternative group whose heavy metal roots and experimental vibe made their sound unlike any other. Hits like Be Quiet and Drive Far Away and Change in the House of Flies made them staples in the late 90s and 2000s rock music scene. And Cheng, who played bass, helped define the band's rhythm and groove. Cheng was with Deftones until a terrible car crash ended his life in 2008. In November that year, Cheng's sister was driving them both in Santa Clara, California when they crashed into another car. Cheng was thrown from the vehicle after it rolled several times and sustained serious injuries that left him in a coma for several months. In 2009, he entered a semi-conscious state and over the next few years started to show signs of improvement, but he was still unable to move or speak. Cheng's friends, family, and fans hoped the bassist would pull through and continue to improve, but his health took a turn for the worse in April 2013. At a hospital in Sacramento, he suffered a cardiac arrest and died aged 42. In the late 90s and early 2000s, pop alt-rock band Train made a name for themselves with their catchy hooks and feel-good melodies. They hit the scene with the 1998 single Meet Virginia, but their legacy as pop rock greats was cemented when 2001's Grammy-nominated Drops of Jupiter hit the airwaves. The single shot up to number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. One of the musicians responsible for those early mainstream hits was founding member and bassist Charlie Colin. Colin was with the group from 1994 until 2003, when he left the band due to issues with substance abuse. He stayed busy in the music scene after his Train days, however, often playing with a number of other groups. By the spring of 2024, Colin was teaching music as well as making it.
All of my worst moments are nuggets of pure gold as a teacher.
That May, however, Colin was watching his friend's house in Brussels when he slipped and fell in the shower. He died as a result. He was 58. Train posted a touching tribute to Colin on Instagram, gushing about his sweet nature and talent on the bass. A soulful trio signed to Michael Jackson's record label, Brownstone was thick in the 90s R&B boom. The group, consisting of Monica Dobie, Nicole Gilbert, and Charmayne Maxwell, scored a huge hit with 1994's If You Love Me. The tune hit the top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart and earned the group a Grammy nomination. Not bad for a single from their debut album, right? Maxwell's powerful vocals amplified the trio's soulful sound until the late 90s. More than 15 years later, however, a bizarre freak accident unexpectedly took her life. Maxwell died on February 28, 2015 after falling and cutting her throat on a broken drinking glass. She was just 46 at the time of her death. Troy Gentry was half of the country crooning act Montgomery Gentry, a duo who rose to fame in the late 90s and aughts with their outlaw twang and steadfast southern rock roots. Gentry and his cowboy pal Eddie Montgomery scored big with chart-topping songs such as If You Ever Stop Loving Me and Roll With Me, soon becoming one of the most successful two-piece country acts around. But their success came to an end after one fateful flight. On September 8, 2017, Gentry was on a helicopter tour of Medford, New Jersey, right before Montgomery Gentry was set to play at a nearby airport. Tragically, the helicopter crashed in the woods next to the airport, killing both Gentry and the pilot. Gentry was 50 years old. A report from the National Transportation Safety Board cited pilot error as the source of the fatal crash, stating that the pilot cut the engine too soon as he tried an emergency landing.
Bobby Fuller had been playing music since he was a kid in Texas, and by 1966, he and his band, the Bobby Fuller Four, had a top 10 hit with I Fought the Law. They were famous and going places. Although this was marred by annoyance at their manager and his many strange ideas for publicity stunts. Otherwise, according to Fuller's loved ones, he was happy. However, on July 18, 1966, Fuller was found dead in his car, covered in gasoline, at the age of 23. Witnesses say he had injuries like he'd been in a fight, and that his car hadn't been in the parking lot where it was found just minutes before, even though he had been dead for hours. If this wasn't weird enough, officials didn't seem to agree on why Fuller ended up dead. While several obituaries in major newspapers implied that he had died by suicide, the official report determined it was accidental. However, even that wasn't conclusive, as the report also had a question mark next to the boxes for both suicide and accident. The debate about whether Fuller's death was suicide, accident, or murder has raged for decades. Fuller's strange death was even included in the October 18, 1996 broadcast of Unsolved Mysteries, and although at least one person connected to him contacted the tip line afterward, the truth about his passing remains unknown. When Chicago was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2016, original member Terry Kath wasn't there, but was not forgotten. As co-founder Lee Loughnane told the Metro, through the years, his guitar playing has been overlooked, probably because he was in such a large band. But if Terry had been in a trio, he probably would have been right up there with Jimi Hendrix, who idolized Terry. Kath seemed to be aware of this as well, since he was planning on releasing a solo album before he died on January 23, 1978. His friend and fellow musician Joe Walsh told Rolling Stone, with that band dynamic in Chicago, he needed to do a solo album. I don't know how much of it was recorded, but he was going in that direction. And it's a shame it didn't happen. He would have never remotely thought about suicide. That was a complete accident. Suicide or accident has always been the question surrounding Kath's bizarre death. The musician was deep into drugs and also loved guns, which is never a good combination. When he died, he was handling firearms which he assured the person he was with were unloaded.
He ejected all the bullets out of the gun. Then he let the clip go, left one in the chamber.
According to Lauder, his last words were supposedly, "What do you think I'm going to do? Blow my brains out?" Sadly, the gun went off. Kath was 31 years old. A cellist trained at the Royal Academy of Music may not sound like your standard rock star, but Mike Edwards was an original member of the Electric Light Orchestra. He played with them from 1972 to 1975, a period that encompassed 4 albums and 2 top 10 hits on the UK charts. Edwards was a big hit with fans, standing out for his kooky outfits and the bits he did on tour, such as playing the cello with a piece of fruit and pretending to play his cello before it exploded. He eventually left the band but continued to play music, and his death fit right in with his strange stage persona. On September 3, 2010, the 62-year-old was killed in a freak accident when a 1,300-pound hay bale rolled off a tractor and into a road. It then slammed into Edwards' car, crushing it. At the time of his death, Edwards was playing with a local group called Devon Baroque, and fellow member Jasper Solomon told BBC News, Mike's talent was his musicality. He could range over all genres from classical to jazz, modern to medieval Renaissance. He lived for his music, and it showed. The chairman of the music group, Angus Gordon, said, "He was simply the nicest guy and a brilliant musician. He taught the cello, and his incredible patience and encouragement, even with the slowest of students, made him a very good teacher." Everyone knows there's a long list of stars who died at age 27, but Les Harvey's inclusion on the list has to be one of the most surprising. He was in several bands in the UK before joining one called Power, which was renamed one night in 1969 by Led Zeppelin's manager. From then on, the iconic Scottish band was known as Stone the Crows, and their albums are still popular re-releases many decades later. On May 3, 1972, the group was preparing to perform at a gig in Wales. Some 1,200 people were in the audience, and according to contemporary reporting, some of them decided to take souvenirs in the form of wires out of the band's electronics before they took to the stage. This, of course, caused technical problems, which took time to fix. Harvey came on stage to explain the delay when disaster struck. As drummer Colin Allen explained to Lauder, "We heard this deep humming sound. Leslie had the microphone in one hand and his guitar in the other. They kind of went together. And then like an arc shape appeared. I was up really quickly and kicked the guitar out of his hand as he was lying on the floor." The accident was caused because a ground wire to the microphone had not been fixed, and when Harvey touched his metal guitar strings, he closed the circuit. He died a short time later in the hospital, aged 27. Philip Taylor Kramer joined the band Iron Butterfly in 1974. and played bass on 2 of their albums. After he left the band, he went on to become a rocket scientist, and then an important figure in the booming computer industry of the early 1990s. But on February 12, 1995, he vanished. Kramer went to pick up a business associate and their partner from the airport, but left before meeting them. Chuck Carter, a private investigator hired by Kramer's family, told the LA Times, "Something happened during that time, either in his head or at the terminal, that made him turn away. And I'll tell you, I haven't a clue. The guy didn't have an enemy. The guy was a dedicated family man."
There's no indication that there's another woman involved. There's no indication of alcohol or drugs or anything of that nature.
What we do know is that Kramer started calling loved ones to say goodbye. Then he called 911 and announced he was going to kill himself and said, "I want everyone to know O.J. Simpson is innocent. They did it." According to the debrief, Kramer was expected to contribute expert testimony at Simpson's trial. However, in 1999, Kramer's van and remains were discovered at the bottom of a canyon. It can't be proven if he died by suicide, and theories of foul play still abound. Some think he might have been threatened over one of his new software programs, but we'll likely never know for sure. The year before he died, Colonel Bruce Hampton told Arts ATL, "I never plan anything. Good, bad, or ugly. I just go with it. I must say that I've always just wanted to play music. Not work music, not earn music. Just play music and make joyful noise. And I don't know if it's good or bad, but I keep doing it. Show up and play." According to CNN, Hampton was known as the granddaddy of the jam scene, and the respect other musicians had for him was clear by how many showed up to jam with him at his 70th birthday concert in 2017. It was the very end of the performance when Hampton dropped to his knees, then laid on the stage. The audience just thought he was playing around, as did the other musicians, who kept playing as Hampton lay there, suffering a massive heart attack. It took several minutes for anyone to realize something was very wrong. However, according to his friends, it's exactly what Hampton would have wanted. Rolling Stones keyboardist Chuck Leavell, who was on stage with Hampton at the time, said, "A poetic exit, and I'm sure if he had written the script himself, that would have been the last page of the last chapter." Additionally, Hampton's former bandmate Jeff Mojer posted on Facebook that he, quote, "could have never imagined a more joyful departure." In the US, the day the music died was the plane crash that killed Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper. But in Ireland and Northern Ireland, that phrase refers to July 31st, 1975, when 3 members of the popular group the Miami Showband were murdered. Show bands were huge on the island at the time. They would travel around playing concerts and regularly cross the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland, which was part of the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, the Miami Showband did this in the 1970s, right in the middle of the sectarian violence known as the Troubles.
Showband scene was fantastic because people were living in the Troubles and it was a release for them.
When the band's van was pulled over, they thought it was a checkpoint, a common occurrence at the time. What they didn't know was it was a fake army patrol made up of Ulster Defense Regiment and Ulster Volunteer Force members. What took the event from purely tragic to bizarre is that the Ulster men didn't plan on killing the band, but instead to place a bomb on their bus that would explode once they were across the border in Ireland. However, it exploded while it was being attached, killing 2 of the Ulster men. The remaining assailants then started shooting at the band, killing lead singer Fran O'Toole, guitarist Tony Garrity, and trumpeter Brian McCoy. 2 other members were injured but survived the massacre. The incident effectively put an end to Irish show bands crossing the border to play in Northern Ireland.